The ship groaned again, not in a poetic, dramatic way, more like an old man easing into a too-soft couch after a large lunch. Gerald Kane tilted his head, listening to the vibration echo through the service pipe he was half crawling inside. Not ideal acoustics, not ideal work conditions, definitely not ideal smell. He'd been marinating in ionic coolant for 2 hours, and if he got back to his bunk and found that someone had stolen his ration bar again, there would be consequences. Mild, passive-aggressive consequences. He pushed himself forward, elbow by elbow, deeper into the conduit, chasing a fault alert on Deck C. The diagnostic panel back in the maintenance bay had lit up like a New Year's simulation, and of course the ship's central AI, LOIS, had cheerfully informed him that it was not urgent, but advised for long-term integrity of life support. Jarrell had considered asking Lois to define long-term, but he'd already learned the hard way not to give her excuses to recite technical manuals at him. With a grunt, he reached the junction node and squinted at the corroded seal. A few taps on his handheld probe confirmed what he'd already suspected. The insulation was decaying. Again, probably from the atmospheric variance during their last brush with a solar storm. Probably also because this ship was 1,000 years old and held together by hope, duct tape, and the occasional threat of explosive decompression. He sighed and started the repair. Just another day aboard the Turnus Sky, the pride of the Interstellar Postal and Resource Logistics Coalition, assuming you measured pride in units of, at least it hasn't exploded yet. Gerald was almost done when he heard the boots. Not standard issue cargo boots like his. These made a sound like precision, like someone who walked not out of necessity, but out of ritual. He froze, listening. A voice followed. Software measured, unmistakably not human. Is this Deck C's central junction? He peered around the corner of the hatch and immediately regretted doing so, with coolant still dripping from his hair. The woman standing there was tall, elegant, and had ears that curved upward in a graceful arc, catching the corridor light like blades of silver. Her eyes were a shade too bright, her posture too straight. She looked like she belonged in an art museum or on the cover of a First Contact pamphlet that said, "They come in peace and with way better cheekbones." Depends who's asking, Gerald said, trying to sound casual. If you're with maintenance, you're late. If you're here to arrest me for stealing extra coffee rations, that wasn't me. And if you're lost, congratulations. Deck C is proud to be the least scenic part of the ship. The woman tilted her head, slowly. Then, strangely, she stepped forward. Not quickly, but deliberately, like someone following a scent. You, she said. Gerald blinked. Me? She sniffed again. Actually sniffed. Her gaze sharpened. You! It's your scent. Gerald looked down at himself. Right. Coolant, rust, and shame. That tracks. She didn't laugh. She just kept staring at him, the way a puzzle stares back when you realize one piece is missing. Your name? He hesitated. Gerald Kane, ship technician, unofficial janitor, part-time counselor to homesick service bots, full-time disappointment to my high school guidance counselor. You were on Kalis Thorne, she said, her voice so calm it made the words worse. 10 years ago, his smile faltered. That's not in my resume. You pulled me from the wreckage, she continued, her tone unfazed. There was fire, screaming. I was trapped under a cargo hauler. You lifted the debris. You told me to run. He opened his mouth, closed it, and tried again. Okay, look, I've helped a lot of people not die, and you're going to have to be more specific. Kalis Thorne, that was, what, the refugee zone during the war? Her eyes didn't blink. You smelled like rust and star anise. Gerald tried to keep a straight face. That is oddly specific, and probably medically concerning. She finally smiled, a small, sharp thing. I remember sense. We all do. We are Ciliari. Oh, he paused. Oh, right. The scent memory people. I thought that was a myth, like guilt-free, deep-fried food. I've searched for you for years, she said, stepping closer. I didn't expect to find you on a corroded logistics freighter patching pipes. Yeah, well, he muttered, nobody dreams of ending up here. We just arrive, like mildew. The corridor lights flickered, just once, a small warning blink. but it was enough to make both of them glance upward. She recovered first. There was a second explosion that day, after you left. He winced. The memory crept back in fragments. Smoke, alarms, the static hiss of half-broken comms, and the overwhelming sense that whatever he'd done, whoever he'd saved, it hadn't been enough. Look, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. If I did what you said, I'm glad you're alive. But I don't remember everything. That day was a mess, and I didn't think anyone even noticed I was there. I did, she said, and I want to know why. Gerald blinked. Why I saved you? Why you ran after? He exhaled, long and slow. Lady, I didn't run. I evacuated, under strict encouragement from several large explosions. But she wasn't laughing. Her face was calm, yes, but focused, curious, dangerous in the way curiosity becomes when it has a purpose. I'm Lerai, she said finally. You may have changed your uniform. You may have tried to disappear. But to a Ciliari, scent is truth, and yours hasn't changed. Jariel nodded slowly. So let me guess. You're not just here for the malfunctioning atmospheric valve, are you? Lerai gave a faint smile. Number. But I'm glad it led me here. Jarrell sighed. Well, next time, send a postcard. Maybe one that doesn't open with, "You smell like trauma." The ship groaned again, louder this time, a warning in the walls. Somewhere far above them, a pressure valve hissed. Lerai's expression shifted. Not fear, focus. Something is wrong. Jarrell rolled his eyes. You think? And just like that, he was back in it. Jarrell found himself walking 3 steps behind Lerai through the dim hallways of the Turnus sky, mostly because walking beside her felt like standing next to a statue that judged your posture. She moved like someone who had practiced every step in advance, while he kept catching his tool belt on exposed conduit and pretending it was intentional. The last time he'd shared a corridor with someone so poised, it had been a diplomatic envoy from the Androsi hive mind. And those guys literally choreographed their walking patterns in advance. So, what brings you to our fine vessel? He asked, wiping coolant smudge off his sleeve. Looking for more broken piping to sniff? Lerai didn't turn. I was part of the diplomatic detail scheduled to meet with the Terran Commerce Assembly on Thessar Prime. A systems anomaly forced an emergency reroute, and a few days of inspection. Gerald nodded as if this explained anything. Right. Because nothing says diplomacy like boarding a rust bucket with a maintenance crew that communicates mostly in sarcastic memes. Your ship is fascinating, she said, brushing her fingers along the bulkhead as they walked. Its systems are ancient, chaotic. There's a strange sort of logic in how it resists efficiency. Thanks, he said. We aim for just barely functional, like a vending machine that only gives you the snack after it threatens your life. She glanced sideways at him. You're very flippant. It's a defense mechanism, he said, like ink from a squid. Only instead of hiding me, it makes people want to walk away. That got the smallest tug at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't a smile, not quite, but close enough to make Jarrell feel like he'd scored a win. They reached the central diagnostic chamber, and Jarrell unlocked the panel with his maintenance keycard, which had the name Kane written in faded letters and bite marks that suggested he'd once used it to open ration cans. As the console booted, Lerai folded her arms. I need to understand. Why did you help me on Kalis Thorn? He leaned on the edge of the console, frowning as the ship's diagnostics scrolled past. You're still on that? It matters. I didn't know who you were, he said. You were a kid crying under a metal girder the size of a freight loader. Nobody else was coming. I helped because I was there, and someone had to. But you left. Gerald sighed. Look, it was chaos. I stayed behind after the initial evac to help civilians get out. When the second wave of bombing started, I had to get to the last shuttle. That's not running. That's surviving. She was quiet for a moment, then softly. I remembered your scent for 10 years. Gerald blinked. No offense, but that's a really weird thing to say to someone, unless you're dating them or tracking them. In my culture, it's how we remember trauma, she said, and her tone lost any hint of humor. Scent binds memory. What we inhale in moments of fear, joy, pain, It stays with us. Even if faces blur, names vanish. You can change your job, your uniform, your world, but you still smell like rust and star anise. Jarrell stared at her. Okay, but seriously, what is star anise? Is that something you carry in your pocket? Did I fall into a spice rack during the war? Your sarcasm is irritating, she said. It's a package deal. Before she could respond, the console chirped and went red. Jarrell leaned in. Great. Power fluctuations in DECF. Guess which system that controls? Hint, it's the one that keeps the air breathable. I'll come with you, Leray said. Sure, he muttered. It's not like I was hoping to crawl through a tube alone with my thoughts, which are mostly about whether or not I left the rehydrator running. DECF was colder, not just in temperature, but in mood. The lights flickered more here, and the walls had the subtle creak of a hull that wasn't happy being ignored. Gerald popped open the access hatch and looked down the crawl space. You ever been in one of these? He asked. No. Good. Prepare for claustrophobia, static discharge, and the unmistakable smell of melted cable insulation. Also, I may or may not have named the rodents. You're joking. You think I'm joking? He slid in first, wincing as he felt something crunch under his elbow. Pretty sure that was the emergency cheese pack I dropped last month. Sorry, Hank. Hank? Rodent union leader. We have a deal. I feed them scraps. They don't chew on power lines. We're currently negotiating a pension plan. Leray followed, less gracefully than she would have liked. Her shoulders brushed the walls and her ears twitched every time something buzzed near her head. You're unusually calm about electrical systems failing aboard a ship in deep space, she said. I find if you panic about everything, you run out of energy before the real disaster hits. They reached the junction box. Gerald scanned it with his tool. Well, there's your problem. This cable's frayed like a diplomat's nerves during treaty week. Leray crouched beside him. Is that damage natural? He paused, looked closer. This was cut. Clean slice. Someone sabotaged this. She met his eyes. Who would do that? Well, I'd love to say it's just a rodent with an unusually sharp taste in sabotage, but I'm guessing not. He touched a panel and brought up system logs. Here, tampering with environmental controls, masked access signature. Whoever did this knows their way around encrypted interfaces. Leray's expression didn't change, but her ears angled slightly, a subtle sign Jarrell was beginning to interpret as worry. If someone wants to destabilize the diplomatic mission, they'd probably start with power systems, maybe build up to an airlock accident, maybe pin it on someone who smells like war trauma and undercooked coffee. You think you'll be blamed? I know I'll be blamed. I once got accused of causing a systems failure because I was humming near a plasma relay. The official report listed it as rhythmic sonic interference. Leray shook her head. Then we need to find proof. Together. Jarrell blinked. You're offering to help? You saved my life once. Consider this balance. Balance would be a pizza and a nap. She raised an eyebrow. Is that your price? He smiled. Depends on the toppings. And for a moment, just a moment, the cold corridor didn't feel quite so cold. The command deck wasn't supposed to smell like warm citrus and melted polymer. But after a few months aboard the Turnus Sky, Jarrell had learned that wasn't supposed to had very little authority here. The scent was coming from the interface node he'd just opened, a node that was not supposed to have an internal aromatherapy dispenser. Either someone had rewired a coolant coil with kitchen spice packs again, or the sabotage was getting creative. He crouched, waved his scanner over the board, and tried not to think about how the console looked like it had been patched with recycled food tray plastic. Beside him, Leray stood with her hands clasped behind her back, ears perked, watching the scan results like they were sacred runes. Good news, Jarrell said, pointing at a blinking readout. This isn't going to explode. Bad news, someone looped a false diagnostic signal through the primary relay hub. Leray's gaze didn't waver. So the sabotage is deeper than we thought. Yep, we're at full-on conspiracy thriller, but with worse lighting territory now. He sat back on his heels. Whoever did this has access to the ship's backbone systems. Only engineering officers or command personnel could do this, which coincidentally includes me. You suspect yourself? Only when I talk in my sleep and start reciting serial numbers. Or if it turns out I'm a long-dormant spy with amnesia. Wouldn't be the weirdest thing that's happened to me. There was that time on Tellura when I woke up married to a vending bot. Lirai looked at him, and it was hard to tell if she believed him or was mentally filing it under Terran humor. Confusing and unhelpful. You said these systems are controlled from the main terminal grid in the operations subdeck, she said. Can we trace the access? Jarrell grunted. We can try, but if they spoof their credentials, the only way to trace them is by ambient data signatures, things like typing cadence, terminal latency, session echoes. She blinked. You can do that, he smiled. But Lois can. If you butter her up first, she's not just a ship AI. She's an ancient, passive-aggressive librarian crammed into a control unit the size of a microwave. You personify your artificial intelligence? She started it. Last week, she locked me out of the system until I apologized for calling her diagnostic cycle sluggish. They made their way through the central corridor, the path lined with flickering wall panels that seemed to buzz louder the closer they got to the core. The ship's hum shifted subtly, a reminder that they were moving into areas where the hull plating was thinner and the shielding more, well, theoretical. As they walked, Jarrell tapped his comm badge. Lois, it's me. The AI's voice replied, velvety and unbothered. Gerald Kane, maintenance engineer. Voice print recognized. What have you broken? I haven't broken anything. Today. I need a trace on a masked access pattern from last cycle. Environmental control subroutine. Accessing... Oh, that. The pause was just long enough to feel judgmental. Someone's been very naughty. Can you isolate the user? I can tell you their access originated from Terminal C-17, which is currently unassigned. Also, they typed with a rhythmic pattern consistent with someone trained in military code entry, and their session was encrypted with a Ciliari cipher variant. Luray's eyes narrowed. A Ciliari cipher? Gerald looked at her. You guys don't just smell things. You sabotage them too? That's not one of ours, she said. Our official ciphers are classified. No civilian should have access. Lois spoke again, this time with a note of curiosity. Also worth noting, the terminal was used during a scheduled maintenance window, which according to your logs, Mr. Kane, you were supposed to be covering. Gerald sighed. Okay, for the record, I was there. Sort of. I may have fallen asleep behind the coolant stack. There was a lull in system traffic, and I was very comfortable. You were snoring into the CO2 scrubber vent, Lois said. I logged it. Thanks. You're welcome. Lurai looked like she was considering whether or not to exile Jarrell to a garbage airlock. So someone used your shift as cover. He nodded. Which means they had access to my schedule. And yours. Someone aboard doesn't want this diplomatic mission to succeed. I mean, technically, neither do I, Gerald muttered. We have to wear formal uniforms, and mine hasn't fit since I accidentally washed it with heat plating. I look like a sausage at a job interview. We need to question the crew, Luray said. And by question, you mean interrogate with your eyes until they crack? If necessary. They started with engineering. It was the logical place, full of people who liked things that sparked and hissed. The first was Benda, a grease-streaked tech with cybernetic gloves and a laugh like a choked jet intake. Me? Sabotage? No way, Benda said, chewing on a ration gum stick like it owed her money. Last week, I spent 12 hours in a coolant shaft because some genius rerouted the intake through the waste processor. I've got freeze burns in places that don't deserve to be cold. Jarrell winced. Did you see anyone unusual near Terminal C-17? Unusual how? Like glowing eyes and suspicious trench coat? Or unusual like the guy who recites poetry to the engine? Let's go with not assigned to the station, Leray said. Benda scratched behind her ear, where a soldering implant blinked slowly. Saw someone tall, quiet, moved like they were trying not to be noticed, which ironically made them super noticeable. Could you tell what species? Benda shrugged. Couldn't see the ears, but they had the walk. You know, that upright, I've had military spine correction surgery walk. Lirai and Jarrell exchanged a glance. Someone's trying to pin this on the Ciliari, she said, and they're using our own codes to do it. Or, Gerald added, it's one of yours. That's impossible. I mean, I'm sure your people are great, elegant, smell-based, but even good people get recruited by bad causes. Or maybe they just hate diplomacy. Or maybe they're trying to start a war to sell souvenir t-shirts. She didn't smile. I'm just saying, people are weird. They headed toward the diplomatic quarters, deeper into the ship. The halls were quieter here, with cleaner lighting and polished floors that felt like they belonged to a different ship entirely. Jarrell felt underdressed just walking through them. This is where your delegation's housed, right? He asked. Yes, and only high-level personnel have access. Great, because nothing says not suspicious like security doors that squeak and announce your presence. They reached the first door. Lirai touched the panel and it hissed open. Inside, a figure stood at the far end of the room, hands behind their back, looking out the viewport at the stars. And Jarrell, without knowing how, knew. They'd been here the whole time, watching, waiting, and they smelled exactly like regret. The figure turned slowly, almost too slowly, as if dramatic timing was part of their cultural education. Gerald tensed, fully expecting a weapon, a scowl, or at least a scathing monologue about how long it had taken them to arrive. Instead, the person gave them a polite nod and said, "Oh, hello. I didn't realize anyone still used the doorbell." Lirai stepped in first, sharp as ever, her posture all diplomatic steel. "State your name and purpose." The figure blinked, unbothered. "I'm Enli Karan, cultural attaché. I help coordinate the exchange of art, language, and, when necessary, passive-aggressive metaphors." Jarrell narrowed his eyes. "You were in this room during the maintenance window." "Several room," Enli said, unruffled. "My schedule is publicly available, unless you've decided to arrest me for liking starlight and solitude, in which case I request an extradition pastry." Lirai didn't move. "We're tracing a sabotage event that coincided with your presence." "Sabotage?" Enli raised an eyebrow. "Of what? The ship's structural integrity? That seems ambitious. This vessel sabotages itself on a good day." Jarrell stepped in. "We're talking falsified diagnostic signals, rerouted power systems, and an access trace leading to an unassigned terminal, used by someone trained in military code." Enli tilted his head. "So, you think I'm the saboteur because I know how to type efficiently and enjoy unscheduled room visits?" "You also smell familiar," Lirai said, "like burning ceramic and doo-root oil." Enli gave her a surprised look. "You still have that sharp nose. I suppose scent memory never forgets." Jarrell leaned in. "Okay, someone explain to me what doo-root oil is and whether I need to start wearing it as cologne." "It's ceremonial," Lirai said, "used in Ciliari rite of passage rituals, specifically military ones." Enli smiled. "Not many remember that. I left the ranks after Kalis Thorn, before the council began their strategic denials." Gerald felt the floor shift under his mental footing. "You were there?" "I was. A junior officer in the evac detail. Just like her." He nodded at Lirai. "We never crossed paths, different sectors. But I remember the smoke, the sounds, the smell of ozone, and guilt." Gerald ran a hand through his hair. "Okay, I'm sorry. Are we all going to take turns dramatically reminiscing now? Because if so, I'll need snacks." "I didn't sabotage the ship," Enli said. "But I know who might. Someone in our delegation doesn't want this mission to succeed." Jarrell gave a long, low whistle. "Wow, a conspiracy inside the conspiracy. It's like peeling an onion made of secrets." Lirai crossed her arms. "Name them." "I don't know for sure," Enli said, "but there's been chatter. I've intercepted fragments of sublayer transmissions. Someone using an outdated military cipher, routed through relay beacons near the cargo bay. You'd need a relay key and a very old access code to even interface with that system." Jarrell nodded slowly. "Guess where I don't like going, because the lights flicker like a haunted opera house?" "The cargo bay." "I suggest we check it," Enli said. "Of course you do," Jarrell sighed, "because nothing terrible ever starts with, 'Let's go to the darkest part of the ship.'" The cargo bay was colder than it had any right to be, like someone had set the environmental controls to mild panic. Crates loomed like slumbering beasts, all labeled with things like hydroponic nutrients, do not shake, and ambassadorial wigs, fragile. Is it weird that I'm more nervous about the wigs? Gerald muttered. You don't just label something fragile unless it's dangerously fragile. They moved through the narrow walkways, guided by Enley's gestures. He pointed to a maintenance access panel near the far wall. There. That's where the relay splices into the old comms net. Lerai moved to open it, but Jarrell waved her off. Let the man who pays for ship injuries with overtime do it. He cracked the panel open and immediately got a face full of dust and something that smelled suspiciously like expired protein rations. Behind the access grid, the relay node blinked, a steady, quiet pattern, but another light blinked out of sync. Jarrell reached in and pulled out a flat chip wedged into the circuit junction. This isn't standard, he said. This thing's broadcasting to an external signal net. Leary took it, studying the etchings. It's encoded. I can decrypt it, Enley said, taking out a slim device from inside his sleeve. Assuming you trust me. Jarrell looked at him. Then at Leary. She nodded once. All right, Jarrell said. But if that chip contains a recipe for exploding fondue, I'm out. The decryption took several minutes. Jarrell passed the time by balancing a spanner on his nose. Lerai pretended not to notice. Enley's device beeped. It's a transmission log, he said. Multiple signals over the last 10 cycles. They're coordinating with someone off-ship. Probably in orbit around the SAR Prime. Jarrell leaned over. Does it say what they're planning? Enley's expression darkened. Interception. They want to ambush the peace delegates during atmospheric descent. Blame it on an accident. Force our side to withdraw. Loray's jaw tensed. And if we fail to prove sabotage, they get the chaos they need. Jarrell sighed. Why does every peace mission end with someone trying to blow up a shuttle? I vote we hold all future diplomatic summits in escape rooms. At least then, the danger's part of the experience. Lerai turned to Enley. Who else knows about this? No one. I haven't reported it yet. I wasn't sure who to trust. Then we can still act, she said. We reroute the shuttle paths. Stage decoy launches. Buy time. I can fake a launch signal, Jarrell offered. Make it look like the delegates left early. If they try to intercept, we'll catch the transmission signature. Good, Leray said. We'll need you at the helm. Jarrell blinked. Helm? Me? I barely passed flight sim. I once parallel parked a shuttle into a billboard. You're the only one the saboteur doesn't expect. And you've proven resourceful. Flattery, he said. Unexpected. A little terrifying. As they made their way back through the cargo bay, Jarrell couldn't help but glance at the crate of wigs again. You know, if things go badly, I vote we all wear those and start a new life as an interstellar performance troupe. Lerai raised an eyebrow. You think the universe would pay to watch you perform? I'm very good at falling down stairs. On purpose. She didn't laugh, but she did smile. Just slightly. And for Jarrell, that was enough to believe they might survive the next chapter of this madness, even if it involves sabotage, decoys, and possibly theatrical wigs. Jarrell had once imagined piloting a shuttle would be thrilling. A rush of starlight, switches, and the occasional dramatic turn. In practice, it was mostly stress, pre-launch checks, and an overwhelming amount of blinking lights that all seemed to be saying bad things are happening. Press something now. He tapped a panel with more caution than flair. Okay, according to this, we're either cleared for decoy launch or about to jettison the food stores into deep space. Lerai stood beside him in the narrow cockpit, arms crossed, looking perfectly composed despite the fact that they were about to trick professional saboteurs and possibly provoke a high-orbit incident. The controls are marked. Yeah, but they're marked in ciliary glyphs and passive-aggressive subtext. One of these says engage thrusters, and the other says something that roughly translates to, if you touch this, I will explode out of spite. She leaned forward and tapped one of the glowing runes. The shuttle gave a soft rumble, systems coming to life with a quiet purr. That's the right one, she said. I see we're skipping the user manual portion of the evening. He activated the launch program and overlaid the decoy flight path, carefully programmed to make the shuttle look like it was departing with the full diplomatic team aboard. Meanwhile, the actual delegates were 2 decks below in the secure hold, surrounded by Lyria's most intimidating associates and several crates labeled perishables, contains live fire moths for good measure. LOIS crackled in over the comm. Fake shuttle launch authorized. You do realize this means you are, legally speaking, impersonating a dignitary transport? Jarrell raised an eyebrow. Do I get diplomatic immunity? Number you get a stern talking to from the ship's insurance. Nate. I was hoping for a hat. Luray glanced at the screen. The launch window is tightening. Begin the countdown. He took a deep breath, fingers flying across the console. All right, let's fake a flight. The engines flared, and the shuttle rose with a subtle jolt. On every sensor, it appeared to be the official diplomatic departure. Registration tags matched, transponder codes were flawless, and even the onboard environmental readings had been altered to mimic life support patterns for 7 organic beings and 1 suspiciously overwatered plant. 3 minutes into flight, Luray pointed to the sensor panel. There, unidentified ship, no transponder, approaching low orbit from Shadow Quadrant. Gerald squinted. Looks like they're trying not to be seen. Cloaking's imperfect, cheap model, probably a retrofit. They're moving to intercept the decoy, Luray said. He smiled. Let's give them a show. He tapped a series of commands. The shuttle's signature flared brighter for a few seconds, just enough to look like a last-second course correction. The pursuing vessel responded, adjusting trajectory to match. Lois came online again. I've triangulated the source of their coordination signals. Deck 4, secondary comms junction. Internal breach confirmed. Someone's inside the restricted access corridor. Gerald didn't hesitate. Luray, go. I'll hold the shuttle pattern. She nodded once, sharp and silent, then vanished through the hatch like smoke. Gerald redirected the flight path into a slow spin, adding small inconsistencies to the trajectory that would make the shuttle look like it was reacting to pilot stress, because of course a fake diplomat would panic when chased by an unidentified vessel. The saboteur's ship bit the bait harder, accelerating to intercept. He muttered to himself, just keep chasing the shuttle-shaped candy bar, buddy. Meanwhile, Luray moved through the dim-lit deck like a knife wrapped in silk. The corridor flickered with emergency lighting, a result of Jarrell's earlier decision to reroute non-essential systems and claim he was making the ambiance more noir. She reached the comms junction, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, a figure stood hunched over a terminal. Dark clothes, cropped hair, ears partially hidden beneath a cap. Luray's voice sliced through the silence. Step away. The figure spun, startled, but didn't reach for a weapon. That was suspicious. People who weren't hiding things generally panicked differently. The intruder held their hands up slowly, as if debating whether sudden movement would trigger something worse than an arrest. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, the figure said. Luray didn't lower her weapon. You compromised a diplomatic mission. I was trying to stop a war. Back in the shuttle, Jarrell watched the hostile ship close in. Okay, they're either going to fire a warning shot, attempt a forced docking, or invite us to dinner. And I really don't like the odds on that last one. Lois pinged. Incoming signal. Unauthorized access attempt to this shuttle's systems. They're trying to spoof your command input. Gerald furrowed his brow. They're hacking me? Poorly. Still rude. He typed a response into the defense subroutine, routing the signal back at them. Enjoy a bouquet of feedback noise and simulated pilot swearing in 7 languages. The enemy vessel twitched on the sensor. Gerald couldn't see it, but he imagined someone on board now had an earful of aggressive Corelli opera and a diagnostic warning shaped like a goose. Luray stepped closer to the intruder. You're Ciliari. The figure removed the cap. The ears were long, unmistakable, but bore a slight forward curve. An older bloodline, not often seen among the political houses. I'm Renz, they said. I was at Kalis Thorn. I watched my unit burn because of a Terran weapons test no one claimed responsibility for. Luray's tone didn't soften. You chose sabotage over justice. No, Renz said. I chose to expose them. The mission today, it's built on a lie. One side's pretending nothing happened. The other's bearing the truth in ceremony. You endangered lives, and yours didn't? Silence settled like dust. Liray reached forward and tapped a panel. Lois, confirm containment. Security drones are en route. Tell Jarrell to hold the shuttle pattern and patch me through to the enemy vessel. Moments later, Jarrell's console lit up. Lois says you want to talk to the spooky ship? Patch it. He tapped the comms. This is Liray of the Ciliari delegation. Stand down. Your inside operative has been captured. We are aware of your false flag attempt and have recorded every signal bounce you sent. The ship didn't respond at first. Then, a burst of static, followed by a male voice, smooth and calm. Then I suppose we'll have to try harder next time. The vessel veered away fast. Jarrell muttered, some people just can't admit they've been outwitted by a shuttle with a fake plan. Liray returned to the bridge 20 minutes later, Ren secured in a containment pod. She looked tired but calm. Jarrell looked up. Did we just avert an interstellar crisis? For now, he smiled. Great. So we get to do it again tomorrow? She raised an eyebrow. Would you rather go back to repairing power couplings and chasing mystery leaks? He considered that. I'll get my shuttle helmet. Jarrell had never been a fan of formal wear. It pinched in weird places, made him itch in others, and somehow gave him the involuntary urge to walk like someone pretending not to be nervous, which only made him look more suspicious. But here he was, standing in the docking atrium of the Virili, in a pressed ambassadorial tech suit that beeped every time he moved too quickly. This thing has built-in posture correction, he whispered to Liray, who stood beside him like a statue made of grace in light disapproval. Every time I slouch, it zaps me. I think it's trying to kill me diplomatically. It's a neural posture prompt, she said without looking at him, meant to help Terrans appear more balanced. I'm a mechanic, not a hover sculpture. This is cruel and unusual fashion. The diplomatic delegation from Thesser Prime was due to arrive in less than 5 minutes, and the air in the atrium had that tense, perfumed quality that always came with high-level peace talks or very polite assassinations. Jarrell adjusted his collar. The suit pinged him. Stand straight. You are representing the future of interstellar cooperation, it said in the voice of what he could only describe as a disappointed but expensive butler. Across the chamber, Enli Karan was casually leaning against a column, looking as if this was just another morning in his disturbingly well-pressed life. Jarrell had a sneaking suspicion Enli slept in suits that folded themselves. You really trust this guy? Jarrell asked quietly. Liray didn't respond right away. I trust his motivations more than I trust his methods. But right now we need his knowledge and his smile. I don't like his smile. That's because it works. Before Jarrell could reply, the outer airlock hissed and began to open. A column of silver-cloaked figures stepped through, flanked by automated guards shaped like elongated beetles. The leader removed their hood, revealing a face sharp as a blade, skin tinged with the pale violet hue of the Thessar nobility, and eyes that looked like they had seen one too many planetary detonations. Ambassador Narell, Liray said with a formal bow. Commander Liray, Narell replied, we expected a higher-ranking emissary, or at least someone with better posture. Jarrell's suit zapped him again. Ow, I'm trying, okay? The ambassador's gaze flicked to him. And you are? Jarrell hesitated, then straightened his back with visible effort. Jarrell Hahn, civilian systems engineer, part-time shuttle impersonator, full-time crisis janitor. There was a pause, then, unexpectedly, Neril smiled. At least one of you is honest. The entourage moved into the central corridor, toward the negotiation chamber. Jarrell followed at the rear, doing his best not to trip over his own feet or accidentally insult an alien culture by standing in a sacred beam of light. As they settled into the conference hall, Lois began displaying the security overlays on the perimeter. All systems stable, 0 anomalies. Passive scans show no unexpected heat signatures. Jarrell whispered to the nearest wall panel. You said that before the sandwich incident. That sandwich was registered as a Class 3 biochemical hazard, Lois replied. The chef was dealt with. I still miss the pickles. The room dimmed slightly and a central projection lit up, casting a holographic replica of both Empire's territories in elegant, swirling lines. Jarrell sat at the side of the room, just close enough to feel important, but far enough to be ignored if things got complicated. For the first 20 minutes, everything proceeded with the usual ceremonial gravitas. Measured phrases, ritual quotations, shared symbols placed precisely between negotiators. Then Leroy leaned forward slightly. The Saliari delegation requests a formal acknowledgement of the events at Kalis Thorn. That stopped the room. Ambassador Norell didn't flinch, but the temperature of the chamber dropped metaphorically by several degrees. There is no documented confirmation that such an incident occurred under sanctioned Thessaran command, he said. Enley stood slowly. Because the documentation was buried, we have recovered transmission logs, declassified fragments, and first-hand testimony. If this agreement is to mean anything, it must start with the truth. Gerald held his breath, and maybe a pen, because his hands needed something to do. Norell raised a hand. One of his aides stepped forward and handed over a sealed data cube. This was recovered from an outpost believed lost. It contains footage. The incident in question. We were told it was an enemy ambush, but the audio contradicts that. You may present it. Leroy took the cube with a grip that suggested she might crush it out of principle. She slotted it into the projector. The room was silent as the hologram flared to life. Kalis Thorn as it had once been, beautiful, smoking, fractured. The footage played out in silence. Soldiers fleeing, fire in the skies, and a voice in the static saying, "We shouldn't be here. This isn't our target." Jor-El leaned forward. The voice was human, Terran, from a unit never listed in the official reports. The room exhaled in collective realization. Leroy closed the feed. We are not here to demand revenge, only recognition. Ambassador Norell nodded slowly. Then let us begin again, with open eyes. As the delegates resumed talks, Jor-El found himself exhaling so hard he almost deflated. Well, he muttered to himself, that only mildly felt like sitting on a live reactor core. Lois pinged him privately. If you are finished hyperventilating, I suggest you return to Deck 9. Your latest repair request has been upgraded from inconvenient to actively catching fire. Jor-El sighed. Peace is so demanding. He stood, cracked his knuckles, and shot Leroy a look. She nodded ever so slightly. One of those tiny gestures that somehow said, thank you, good work, and don't let the ship burn down while I'm saving diplomacy. As he walked toward the lift, his suit pinged him again. Posture correction required. He jabbed the control. You want good posture, suit? Try standing up to interstellar trauma. The lift doors closed behind him, humming gently as it carried him away from the peace talks and back toward the chaos he understood best. Cracked conduits, faulty dampeners, and the comforting scent of toasted circuits. Gerald was elbow-deep in an access panel, surrounded by a truly irresponsible number of sparking wires, a half-disassembled coolant coil, and something Lois swore was not a sentient fungus, even though it hummed when he sang off-key. He'd been summoned to fix a power relay that had been behaving strangely, which turned out to mean it occasionally screamed in binary and refused to run life support for more than 12 minutes at a time. Lois, he grunted, yanking a scorched cable free. When I asked for diagnostics, I didn't mean surprise me with electrical jazz hands. You did not specify not to surprise you, Lois replied coolly. Also, the fungus has requested more humming. That's not comforting. He twisted in place and slammed the panel shut, only for it to spark defiantly. Seriously, he muttered, we negotiate interstellar peace treaties, but our ship's power grid thinks it's a haunted opera house. Lois chimed in with a brief alert tone. Commander Leroy is requesting your presence in Observation Bay 3. Gerald wiped his hands on a rag that had once been white, but now looked like it moonlighted as a soot enthusiast. Is this about the peace talks? Number she did not mention diplomacy, but she did say, bring him before he sets another fire. Well, now I'm definitely curious. He arrived in Observation Bay 10 minutes later, hair still full of static from a plasma vent that had exploded slightly on the way. Leroy stood at the center of the room, arms crossed, watching the stars drift past in slow procession. Jor-El joined her with a lopsided grin. You know, you always pick the most romantic places to deliver terrible news. She didn't smile, but her ear twitched slightly. That was as close as she got to laughing. I wanted to show you something. The observation deck lights dimmed, and a new feed lit up the dome above. An orbital map of the virialized current position over the neutral zone. Multiple ships drifted nearby, their signatures tagged in Ciliary script in standard galactic shorthand. One of them pulsed in red. "That's not us," Jarrell noted. "No," she said. "That's the Aventir, a civilian medical ship. Or so its registry claims." Jarrell squinted at the data feed. "You think it's another saboteur?" "I know it is." Enley intercepted an encoded signal bounce from their navigational relay to a ghost satellite just outside the SAR space. They're mapping movement patterns. Ours. Theirs. The timing suggests they're preparing to fabricate a military provocation. Jarrell rubbed his temples. "So the same people who almost got us blown up with a fake shuttle chase are trying again? But now with a fake hospital ship? Do they just hate diplomacy? Or is this some deep space performance art I'm too grounded to understand?" "They're trying to restart the war," she said. "They need chaos to thrive." Jarrell paced once. "Okay, can we expose them before they trigger anything? We can't prove it from here, but if we board the Aventir, we may find enough in their nav core to shut the operation down before it begins." "Sounds simple," he said. "And by simple, I mean the kind of plan that ends with me crawling through another ventilation shaft, asking why everything smells like engine grease and lies. I would never send you in alone?" "Good, because I've already named the fungus on Deck 9, and I promised it I'd be back." That got her to raise an eyebrow. They prepped in silence, save for Jarrell's running commentary about how all infiltration suits should come with snack compartments, and how ciliary gloves were clearly not designed with Terran thumbs in mind. "I feel like I'm being gently strangled by luxury fabric," he muttered as he pulled on the last of the gear. "It's adaptive weave. It resists sensor tagging and automatically adjusts to heat signatures. It also rides up." They boarded a tiny stealth pod, silent, unregistered, and held together by what Jarrell suspected was sheer spite, and launched from a maintenance hatch. The stars spun slowly around them as the pod made its way toward the Aventir, guided only by a whisper-thin trail of encrypted coordinates. Jarrell watched the ship approach, looming like a peaceful whale with secrets. "You know, when I imagined galactic heroics, I thought I'd at least get a cape." "I could requisition one," Leroy said, "but it would be heavily regulated and probably tax-deductible." The pod docked silently. They moved through the underbelly of the Aventir like shadows, Leroy with fluid precision, Jarrell with the cautious shuffle of someone who'd once fallen through a floor panel and refused to let it happen again. In the core room, the nav system pulsed softly. It looked benign, like any other ship's brain, but the feed told a different story. Jarrell plugged in a bypass node and watched as layers peeled back. Encrypted loops, pattern overlays, and a simulation model labeled Provocation Initiative Alpha. "Oh, wow," he muttered. They were going to fake a Thessaran weapon strike on a civilian colony in Terran space, broadcasted in real time. That's dark even by sociopath standards. "We have what we need," Leroy said. "Let's extract before—" A klaxon blared. Jarrell blinked. "Did we trip something?" "I didn't. I might have. I possibly leaned on something that looked like a cup holder but wasn't." The wall behind them slid open and two guards entered. Jarrell reached for the stun grenade clipped to his belt. Leroy stopped him with a subtle gesture. "No need." She stepped forward and, in 3 fluid movements, disarmed one, flipped the second into the wall, and pulled Jarrell behind her as if he were a mildly clumsy suitcase. Jarrell peeked out. "That was extremely attractive. We need to go." They fled down a maintenance corridor, alarms pulsing like angry jazz. Lois came online in Jarrell's earpiece. "You've caused a diplomatic incident." "No," he whispered, dodging a pipe. "We're preventing one, possibly while getting shot at. Would you like a rescue pod?" "Yes." "Too late. You're already halfway there." They dove back into their stealth pod, hit the auto return, and watched the Aventir drift away behind them. Data secured, systems scrambled, and hopefully enough evidence to publicly fry whoever had been pulling strings from the shadows. Jarrell exhaled. "So, you think this is all done?" Leroy looked at him. "We just uncovered the fuse. The question is, how many are still lit?" Jarrell sighed. "Well, As long as we get snacks before the next one explodes, I'm in. The virilized atmosphere smelled like fresh sterilizer and victory. The kind of victory that left bruises, burned fingers, and the lingering suspicion that the fungus on Deck 9 had somehow promoted itself to morale officer. Jarrell stood at the main viewport, sipping a cup of something Lois swore was tea, but that he suspected was actually reconstituted enthusiasm with a hint of lemon. "You did it," Lyrae said beside him, quiet and certain. Jarrell blinked. "I did?" She turned slightly, the soft blue glow from the nav map reflecting in her eyes. "You found the leak, exposed the network, and stopped an interstellar incident, all while maintaining a 50% survival rate for your jumpsuits. I mean, one of them caught fire twice. That's at least 60% if you grade on effort." The ship vibrated gently as the last of the Thessaran delegation detached in their shuttle, heading back to their system with a peace treaty confirmed, a scandal uncovered, and one very awkward apology delivered over the diplomatic intercom in 3 languages, 2 of which required glottal clicks and 1 awkward interpretive hand dance. Jarrell took another sip of his maybe tea. "You think it'll stick? The peace?" "It has a chance now," Lyrae said, "because we removed the shadow from the negotiations. It may not be permanent, but it's real." He nodded slowly. "That's more than we had when we started. More than most ever get." There was a long silence, the kind that didn't ask to be filled, just shared. Then Jarrell said, "So, what now? Do I get a medal? A parade? A ship that doesn't groan when I breathe near the engine room?" "You get a reassignment," she said with an almost smile. "Lois says you're too valuable to stay in one place." Jarrell snorted. "Lois also said I snore like a defragmenting AI. That's been independently verified." Footsteps echoed behind them, and Enli Karan appeared with his ever-flawless hair, in the sort of satisfied smirk you only earned by surviving 3 assassination attempts and an interspecies debate on snack-based trade sanctions. "Jarrell," Enli said, "I've been authorized to offer you a post. Field specialist, cross-sector, danger pay, mildly illegal fringe benefits." Jarrell tilted his head. "How mildly are we talking?" "Nothing that can't be disguised as cultural exchange." Jarrell glanced at Lyrae. She didn't answer, just raised one eyebrow. "The alien equivalent of your move, genius." "You know," he said, "I was going to go back to my repair shop on Lothan 4. Had a few orders waiting. A broken weather dome. A vending unit that shot snacks at high velocity. Sounds peaceful. Suspiciously so." He looked out the viewport again. Stars drifted by like slow sparks from a fire too big to ever really go out. He realized in that moment that something had shifted, that before all this, he would have said no without thinking. But now his fingers itched to tinker with more than broken panels. He wanted to fix things that mattered. He set his mug down. "All right, I'm in, but only if I get to name the shuttle." Enli shrugged. "Within reason. Then I christen it the Compulsively on Fire. Has a nice ring, yeah?" Lyrae rolled her eyes. "Please don't let him near official documentation." Later, he visited Deck 9 one last time. The fungus had formed a pleasant geometric pattern near the pipes, which he chose to interpret as a farewell gesture. He touched the wall lightly. "Hey, don't let anyone reprogram Lois to sing during emergencies. That was a mistake. I'm still having dreams about musical hull breaches." Lois's voice buzzed. "Acknowledged. Also, the fungus has submitted a petition for watering privileges." "I told you it was sentient." "Unproven, though its art is improving." He chuckled and turned away. As he walked back toward the docking bay, he passed crew he now recognized not just by face but by voice, by laugh, by which snack they hoarded in the break room. Somehow in all the mess, this had become more than a temporary assignment. It had been a mirror, one that showed him he wasn't just a man patching cables and dodging explosions. He had been a bridge, a link in a chain that stopped a war. Lyrae was waiting at the shuttle. She handed him a data chip. "This is the official report. You're mentioned in 7 footnotes and 1 oddly poetic appendix. Let me guess, subject prone to combustible optimism? More like unexpectedly reliable in high-stress diplomacy and unauthorized vent crawling." He paused. You ever think, maybe this wasn't coincidence? That you knew who I was all along? She didn't answer. Just turned slightly so the lighting caught the curve of her ears, that subtle alien mark he had once seen in a dream, and now knew better than any face. You remembered my scent, he said. I remembered being saved. I remembered fear. Then safety. You smelled like ozone and old metal and something that didn't belong on that battlefield. You smelled like hope. He blinked quickly. You make it sound a lot cooler than I felt. You were terrified, but you didn't leave. They stepped into the shuttle. The doors closed behind them. As the engines hummed to life, Gerald strapped in and glanced at her across the small cabin. So what now? Save another galaxy? Convince more stubborn diplomats not to commit planetary idiocy? Possibly. Maybe find better snacks? I'll see what I can do. As they launched from the Virili, the stars opened before them, wide, uncertain, and full of things waiting to be understood. Jarrell leaned back in his seat, let the hum of the drive soothe the last of his nerves, and realized for the first time in his life, he wasn't just running from chaos, he was flying towards something, and he wasn't alone.